Right. So our next presentation is from Maria Burns Ortiz, CEO of Seven Generation Games. As CEO and co-founder of Seven Generation Games, she is a passionate advocate for multilingual games and interactive apps for students. Under her leadership, Seven Generation Games has been awarded numerous accolades such as Best in Learning Game Artwork and named as TechCo's Top 50 Seat Startups of the Year. She was awarded the National Latina Businesswoman Association's Rising and Emerging Star Award in 2017 and received recognition from the White House as an invited speaker on entrepreneurship at the White House's United States of Women Summit in 2016. So, want to welcome Maria, and please, if there's any housekeeping issues that any of you have, please put them in the chat, and Megan or I will be sure to get right back in touch with you. Thank you all.
Hi, it says my video is stopped to host, but can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Well then,
and I'll make sure that Megan shifts the video setting.
Yep, I think you can all see me now.
Yes.
So, all right, thanks so much. I'm just sharing my screen here and we will get started. Right, so I'm assuming everyone can see the first slide. If not, hopefully. All right, so thanks, Tori. So we're here to discuss how to excite, empower, and educate, or how to get kids without hovering. And just to give you an overview, it's a bit of presentation. I'll try and get as active, hands-on as much as we can via largely one-way webinar. But it's a combination of our tools and then tools don't make but like, and everything we hit on today is currently free. Completely just have a full solution for every individual person on this virtual session specific needs, but it's probably not going to happen. However, hopefully this either gives you a specific example that you can directly use or relatively easily adapt it so you can serve your students as an inspiration for something that fits your needs and your class's needs. It's a little hard to see questions in the chat when in presenting mode, but I'll try to work to check that during the hands-on part. And my co-founder, Anne-Marie, will be assisting me with field questions and answering comments and stuff in there as well. So as I mentioned, I'm Maria Ortiz. I'm co-founder and CEO of Seven Generation Games. And we have one app in the pre-KK range. We cover some second grade standards, primarily games focused on grades 3 through 8, which will be the primary focus of this session. With a supplemental library, we have teacher resources. We've got 12 games in that range with a few additional ones in development. I've also got 3 children that fall in that range, no additional ones in development. And I already knew heading into this pandemic that I absolutely love them, but our relationship functions best when we spend 7 or 8 hours apart, 5 days a week. They're under strict orders right now to not touch the office door for the next 45 minutes, but I can't promise cameo-free presentation. I gave a presentation about 2 weeks ago and was very clear, do not enter this room for 45 minutes, lots of nodding and promising, and we hit minute 35 and it was this, but here we go. So I'm on a school advisory committee and the leader sent out an email saying, we're trying to gauge how's distance learning going for everyone. Now coming into this, I knew I was qualified, right? I literally run an educational software company. I've actually taught in the classroom. I understand Common Core. My school is dual immersion. I speak both languages fluently. And still, at the end of the day, I'm completely exhausted and over it. And I post pictures like this of how happy we are on social media, and mostly learning is going like this most of the time. And every day it feels like preparing for battle. So this is a scene in our new upcoming game we're producing, Aztec Empirical Empire. It's a history-based game about using an epidemic spread to teach math. It's clearly far more relevant now than we could have imagined when we pitched it in September. And the internet tells me I'm not alone, right? And I joke about it, but it's one of those laugh or cry kind of things. But it's significant as we head into summer and beyond when we look at what learning is going to look like. Because let's be honest, we're all hoping that we go back in the fall, but I'm also hoping for the sake of your students that your schools are like all of the other schools that we work with and you're planning to go back, but looking at what learning might look like if we don't, or if we go back in a modified way for some amount of time. And this is especially important because we're seeing momentum behind distance learning is waning, right? It's kind of like a national level senioritis. Everyone is feeling it, and I'm sure many of you have experienced it. It's not just parents, but students and teachers, right? I was talking to one of our teachers, and they were saying they've got a class, 25 kids in the class. They're in a rural area where digital access is a huge issue. So everything is packets, and teachers go to the house to drop off food as part of school nutrition and pick up the packets. And so the first week, 22 packets done, not bad. The next week it was 13. Third week it was 2. And what we're finding, and I don't want to say finding because that would assume we didn't know this, and I think most of you are probably tapped into what's going on in your schools and communities, but what we're really experiencing is just how wide the equity gap is. And this matters because we know, and there's all this research showing the importance of parental involvement, which we're now even seeing a drop in homes where we didn't traditionally before. And so what can we do to mitigate that? And how can we make sure we're not leaving out the kids who are already behind? And we, like all of you, have been trying to figure out what that means and what that looks like since the start of school closures. We really have been thinking about how to make distance learning not just easier, but also more equitable, because we know this is not only going to exacerbate an already significant gap, or we know it is going to exacerbate an already significant gap. So we went back to the beginning, and for us, we were initially founded and funded to work on developing educational software to close the math gap for tribal communities. And we did that through integrating tribal history, because math is incredibly important. And we know that not just because people say that, but because there's evidence of that all throughout history. You know, how did you survive the winter? How did you know how many buffalo you needed to hunt, right? If you were a nomadic tribe, how long did it take you to get to the next camp? How would you know this? How much distance did you need to cover in each day? And so we integrated that in our games. And then we moved into Mesoamerican history, also creating games that were bilingual. And I'm going to give you a few minutes to check that out right now, because I always find the longer you keep talking, even if you're saying interesting things, the more people stop paying attention. So if you go to this link, I've kind of created a mini quick links cheat sheet that I'll be using throughout the presentation. Anne-Maria will put it in the chat as well. And you might want to keep this page open, as there's a few other things that we'll jump to as we go on. For the record, I kind of hotwired it so you drop into the game without needing to register and go through all of the kind of the intro to get you into the game, because we only have a certain amount of time. For Aztec Meet the Maya, which it gets a little wonky after maybe the second timeline problem, since it's trying to connect to data report, but it'll give you an idea of how the game works, the gameplay part. You can do a few problems, see the scaffolding with the explain. There's a bilingual button in every corner, so you can flip back and forth. So if you're a hands-on person, you can jump into that. If you're more of a watch versus play, I thought about doing kind of a Twitch stream if you're into video games kind of thing, but I will spare you my commentary. So there's a YouTube link there as well, and so you can see it's not a highlight reel of Fish Lake, but it's an actual segment of what gameplay looks like to give you an idea. And Fish Lake is about the Ojibwe migration. Everything culture-wise has been developed and vetted by the tribes depicted. And that's one thing we hear from a lot of educators is struggles about finding accurate and authentic resources around Native history. If that's something you face, please feel free to reach out. My information is here, and my team will be happy to direct and connect you on that. But I will give everyone a couple minutes if you want to go to that Unconference page and check it out, or just go to the YouTube link on there and see what the games look like so you have an idea of what I am talking about. And so I'll give kind of 5 minutes. I know we don't have a breakout room kind of thing, so just if I
Hi, so somebody said they don't see the link, but I've posted in the chat like 6 times, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
Can
and
you
it's the
let me know
same
if you
link.
see it?
Yeah. And it's, if you just type in the link to the 7 Generation Games / May Unconference. Perfect. And I was just looking through the chats. I see one of you here now, of course it moved through, but who said building the plane while flying it. And I was going to use that exact line later. So yes, it is, but hopefully some of the things here will get into maybe things you can use. Yes, and I see Elise said she's Lakota, so we have games in Lakota language as well. So we have games in Lakota, and I'm probably jumping a little ahead, but Lakota, Dakota, and then we'll have Ojibwe and a couple other languages coming out in the next year. So we're excited about that. So I'll give one more minute. I think that's the length. I should have paid exact attention to the timer here in terms of how long the YouTube video was. But, and yeah, everything in this presentation that I talk about is completely free right now. Our games, we have a combination. Some are free all the time. Right now, everything is free while schools are closed. And then everything I mentioned in this presentation will be free. So and so about 70% right now run on Chromebooks of what we have. And then games for 7th through 8th. So some of our games cover 7th through 12th. Some of our games cover 7th and 8th grade standards. We haven't gotten into high school, but to be completely honest, we have more 9th graders than we have 3rd graders, even though we're 3rd through 8th grade standards primarily, because most kids probably equal number or close to a number of 10th graders, just because kids tend to be behind, and you can get kids to play a game that you maybe can't get them to do worksheets. And that's going to be part of what we talk about here in general, but that's part of it. So we built some of it after the high interest, low reading level model, just as a way to engage kids. All right, so I'm gonna just keep going as we go through here. There we go. Enough windows going here. Eventually one of them will show what you need to see. So when we were developing our games, we learned a lot about content-specific teaching, but what we found most important and what spanned every subject was the importance of developing content and curriculum that met student needs, because if you can't reach or engage the students, it really doesn't matter what you have in your curriculum. I mentioned my presentation a couple weeks ago, which was on designing lessons with minimal home help, and I won't re-give that entire presentation, but talking about learning without hovering, there's definitely an overlap, and I'm looking at it from 2 perspectives. One is creating educational experiences that don't require a parent or guardian constantly reminding their student to do it or making sure that they did it, as well as learning activities that don't require an adult constantly on hand or needing to be actively involved, from technical troubleshooting to teaching concepts. And so that means designing to account for limited internet access, right? Starting in tribal and rural communities, this was part of what we did from day one, and even we're still working on it. So in February, about 65% of our games ran offline. We've poured efforts into that since schools started closing, and are now, I believe 90% of our games and apps are capable of running offline. And I think more and more people are finding out just how truly the digital divide still exists. That what works here in a development environment or in the classroom might not work at home, especially in many economically disadvantaged communities and rural areas. And so we're working in schools where in some cases upwards of 40% of kids have no home internet access. And we know that even for many of those kids who might have access, it's not a 1 gigabyte fiber optic line, but spotty Wi-Fi from a low-end Android phone, right? And I know many districts and cities have pushed to get kids devices and families internet. And in some cases I've heard it's been great. Others I've heard it has fallen far short. But the last thing we want is to have kids who are already left behind. And I keep saying this, but I think it's such an important part, and we're starting to see the gaps that exist in a lot of the technology out there, at greater risk of being left behind and left out altogether. We're also dealing with limited parental educational attainment in many cases. In a lot of the communities we're in, less than 10% of parents have a college degree, and many times the kids who need homework help the most have the least access to it. My kids are going to come out of this relatively educationally unscathed, and I'm sure if you're parents, your children will as well. What we need is to design lessons and activities for kids who don't have that safety net. Limited language proficiency, and this is one of those things that many of us know, but it sometimes is hard to understand. And I've been working with bilingual ed teachers for years to develop the content and curriculum that's in our Aztec game series, which are Spanish, English, bilingual, as well as some of our Making Camp games. But this was really just hit home to me because I was helping my daughter the other day, and she's in immersion school, and they're doing verbos irregulares, which is irregular verbs, and that by definition, they're words that conjugate in a way that make absolutely no sense, right? So in English, eat and ate, go and win. If I didn't speak the language her homework was in, there was no way I could have helped her. And it would have been unreasonable. And for millions of students, that's their reality. So we do a huge disservice to our students by giving them assignments that they just can't do. And we think about this through a bilingual framework, and that's clearly part of it. So we have games in multiple languages with the language of instruction controlled on every screen. But it's also academic language, right? A lot of parents might struggle with that. Either they didn't master it themselves, or it's just been 30 years since they were asked, what's the difference between a kingdom and an empire? And so we developed a growing line of games, or a growing line of what's the word vocab videos to kind of help supplement that. And one thing that, we were running into was, limited parental time. So when we developed our games, the idea was there might be multiple reasons. And we're really running into that now more than ever, right? Whether parents are, in healthcare or social workers in their grocery stores, or whether they've been laid off recently and they're, dealing with that and the stresses that come with that, or whether they're fortunate enough to have a job they can balance working from home, but they're trying to do that with distance learning, in many cases distance learning multiplied. And so the more we can remove the demand for parental time from student learning, the better results and buy-in we're going to get. And so we developed our games with this idea of independent learning in the classroom, but that's become a big feature as we've moved into learning from home. And so this is just a recap kind of those key things to keep in mind. So what does learning experience look like that doesn't require a lot of parental participation or hovering? And how can we come up with ways so that kids are excited about it and that it meets learning needs? Because we know these things don't have to be mutually exclusive. I always start with, and maybe this is because this is how we ended up this way, but looking at ways you can make it cross-curricular. We started because one of our early founding team members was tribal school board president, and we were looking at closing the math gap. And the truth was, if we were looking at the more time spent on culture, the data was showing, the worse kids were doing in math and language arts, which is because it's a zero-sum game, right? So if time was being taken to put towards that during the school day, it was going to have to come out of other subjects. And he said, I can't accept that my kids on my reservation are going to know their culture or they're going to know math. So let's find a way to fix it. And so we talked about it as kind of looking at a 2-for-1, right? So whether you're integrating social studies with math or reading assignments, it can really cut across any topic. We talk a lot about what good video games have, and one defining factor with games is a good engaging storyline. And what is history if not filled with incredible stories? And it's about finding ways to connect those pieces. The first problem in Aztec Meet the Maya came actually directly from a request from social studies teacher. And so it's the first math problem, but it's from a social studies teacher, and it's actually an ELA standard in Common Core. So it was reading a timeline. And I think a lot about that because real life isn't broken down by subject, and we can look for ways to make our curriculum and lessons reflect that. 5 years ago, we were trying to come up with a project aimed at combating the summer slide when it comes to math. And it started as an idea for a site teaching math and history, because that's what we do, but we knew it had to be more fun. And we realized that with learning over the summer, we're also finding now in distance learning, you have to be more creative and engaging your learner, which resulted in what has ended up being our most successful game series to date, Making Camp. We now have an Ojibwe, or Chippewa, it might be another name people know it as, version in English and Spanish. We'll have it in Ojibwe in the next year. We've got a Lakota version. So the Lakota were part of the Sioux Nation, Lakota, Dakota, and that's bilingual in Lakota. And then we're releasing a Dakota game that will also be in Dakota this year. And we're in pre-production on a Navajo edition and one with a series of set of tribes in Oregon. So we're going to take a 5-month break. If you go back to that, a 5-minute break, sorry. If you go back to that to play around with Making Camp, and again, with the links there, it drops you in, so you don't need to register. For kids, they register, they'll have a username, so it can kind of keep their points mainly. And then teachers can access reports as well. But if you do play Making Camp, you should make sure that you check out where you get points as you play. You can then trade those points in. There's a little wigwam in the bottom corner if you're playing Making Camp Premium. It's a teepee if you're playing Making Camp Lakota. Numbers is math section. Social studies content is under life. Words is ELL. And you can drop in the Dakota one if you play there. You can also hear Lakota language for the videos. And then the text is also in Lakota. So I will give you a few minutes on that, and then we'll get back to it. And then on this same link, I will also, when this is done, put up the PowerPoint presentation so you can have the slides and everything from that as well. And I do see a question about captions, and we are actually in for students who are deaf or hard of hearing, and we're in the process of going back and trying to do that for a lot of the games going forward. That's something that we're doing, and part of it is just bringing things back up. Yes, and our goal is really, we talk about accessibility, and we really mean accessibility, whether that means for students with disabilities, special education, access, digital access. So we are very mindful of that. So I'll give another 30 seconds or so, and then we will keep going. And all these links are there. And like I said, all the games are freely available. So if you like them, you can always play them afterward as well. So kind of going back to it, it was important to us when we were developing this that teachers could use our games different ways. Using it in social studies class or math class has been the most common ways, but we've had creative folks use it for music or PE, developing lesson plans around that. But it was because I think one thing that teachers really want, and we found need, and teachers have been involved in every element of this creation from day one, is things that they can use how fits their classroom's needs. So not use this exactly this way at exactly this time. And so we've tried to do that. But it was also really important that it be done in a way that engaged students, because let's be honest, no matter how great your lesson plan is and how clearly you have the learning objective laid out, it doesn't matter if the kids won't engage with it. And we can say that lessons should always be engaging, but with distance learning, kids are at home and there's a bunch more options versus when they're in the classroom. And sometimes not doing work is the most attractive one, right? And especially if your parent is busy doing their work or distracted, it happens in this very house more than I would actually like to admit. When we made Making Camp, my older daughter was right in our key demographic, right? She was our target user age. And one night she was in bed and I got up, and it's that thing where they're under the covers on the iPad, and I pull it back in this dramatic gotcha kind of moment. You're supposed to be asleep. And she was up playing Making Camp. So I was really conflicted between, oh my God, you really like the game? What do you think? And it's bedtime, you should be sleeping, right? But that's what we strive for, and that takes some creativity. And it doesn't mean you have to start completely from scratch. It just means maybe reformatting what you already have, and finding creative ways to do assignments is going to be another key in getting kids to complete them. Through Making Camp, we've actually learned a lot. So the first was, it doesn't have to be as high tech as you think. This is Fish Lake. I think it's the most beautiful game we've done of all of our games. It is a scene. This is a scene from a canoe part of the game. And yet Making Camp has probably 3 times as many users. And here's a picture of the canoe game there. And I love Making Camp in its own way. But when you think about it, especially in education, and for many of the schools we work with, it's function over form. It has to be, right? And does it run on our devices? Can we stream it over our Wi-Fi? Those are the much more important issues. We have teacher reports that educators, so that educators can see how their students are doing. But we also look at that data, and we don't collect PII, so everything is privacy compliant. But that lets us see what activities students choose from and engage the most. And from there, I've pulled some of the most popular activities that we find them engaging with and engaging with repeatedly, as well as some tools that you can use so they're to make DIY versions of your own content. So in our Life or Social Studies section, the matching games get the most interaction, and ours is set up so it's kind of, you pick an image and a word, and so you're doing matching. They're seeing the images, and they're also talking about this larger, usually through their social studies units that they're doing, or if they're a tribal school, it's kind of a lot of what they kind of have integrated throughout their curriculum. And so the matching games are really successful. One that I really like, a DIY version of the site, is Match the Memory. I use it a lot when I do middle school game design workshops, and so it lets you create your own memory game. You can do all sorts of different options. You can put words on one card, a word on a card, an image on another card. You can do a word, say a term and a definition on another card. And then you can also, if you want, put in things that pop up when the answers get right. So if you want them to do it and like prove that they did it, you can put in a little message or something that'll come up and have them sort that out. So that's one option to do that. And I know drill and kill isn't maybe what you'd be doing in class for learning, but it's a fun way to create an activity. And even better, what I like about this and what I tried to do with the things that I picked is you can just send the link. Students can do it. They don't need a login. They don't need to sign up. It's here's a URL, go play this. And I really think that as we go into summer, whether it's summer school or enrichment, we need to have lessons that are going to be a little different from the past, and they're going to get kids who want to do them. Puzzle Fast makes a whole bunch of different kinds of puzzles. So they have crossword puzzle, they have a word search puzzle, and what I like about them is you can switch it up. So you basically, you put in your words and your clues or your hints, and then you can say, I want to do it as a word search puzzle. And you say, oh, actually, that's really confusing. I want to do it as a crossword puzzle. And it just lets you click through them and give those. And then what I also like, sorry about that, is you can't, probably might not be able to see here, but there's a little link in a little key in the upper left-hand corner, and it'll either reveal the answers. You can choose to include that or not. So it's another way. Image mapping is something we did in Making Camp. So we did it around traditional uses of buffalo. So basically pairing things with the, what part is a hide from? What would they use to make a knife? So we did that. Purpose games, you can basically put in an image and you can put the points that you want them to identify. And then what I also like about this is it basically grades the assessment as they go through it. So they're getting instant feedback. And that's a big thing that I think is valuable. Jeopardy Lab Activity lets you kind of basically create a Jeopardy game. If you go to the example on the Unconference link, which you'll get to in like 30 seconds, I've kind of created a mixtape version of Jeopardy's done with students, so it can be super straightforward. You can have students submit the questions and even give credit to the students, which they submit for the ones they submitted, and kids always like to see what their classmates came up with as well as their own name. One drawback with this is it doesn't give you a place to put in answers, so it's click and reveal. But one thing that you can do is, I think it's in the last column, it's an example of how one teacher used this assignment with some built-in scaffolding. So again, it's something like this. You can share it, create it, they can access it, no login, no registration, easy is the key. So that's kind of what I look for when I'm looking for tools and assignments this time. And the thing I always say about Jeopardy is kids these days know, but kids typically don't know and get that it's an answer question format. So we usually just drop that part in the answer. So I will give you about 5 minutes to go through that, and then we will go from there. Kind of, I have some of the links there. So just in the interest of time, we'll keep going. So the next thing that I will talk about is kind of critique, right? And so if you especially teach middle school, you know there are no better or no more willing critics than middle schoolers, right? And when we originally designed this assignment, we did as a way up to get student feedback and engagement so that we can engage them in the design process. And we wanted to get participation levels from this level of enthusiasm to this, right? And we play this game, then offer ways we could make it better. How could we flesh out the storyline? Ways we could improve activities, looking at it through the lens of game design. We wanted to know, how would you improve this? And we'd previously done this through discussion, which was not nearly as effective with the kids as we would have liked. So we made one change, which was this, and it increased our response rate by 80 times. I literally have drawers of these cards in my office from students, and we really do use them when relevant, as I'll show you, but we found just offering really basic sentence stems and examples radically changed the level of critical thinking that we were able to engage. And using this approach has been really successful in getting kids excited about a topic, whether we make a game about it or not, right? And teachers have said, we just start saying we're going to look at it through a game lens, but using this game design as a framework. So we've done them around the railroad, Chilean independence movement, Native American and Mesoamerican history, and then our teachers have taken the cards on that Unconference page. There's a set with kind of the stems, and then also just a completely blank version that you can use your own, because teachers have taken them and customized them around their topics. And so then we take what they've said on the cards and we use that to dig further into the discussion and learning. So for example, they said, you should do a cooking game. Okay, what would they traditionally cook? And would you have access to those ingredients? How would they find them? And we talk a lot about history not being on X date, X happened, but an understanding of how people lived and how that shaped our world today. With zombies, there was like a 2-year period where it was all add zombies, and we were able to go from there to, well, there were no zombies, but we were able to look at Ojibwe legend and mythology, and Wendigos, I argue, are definitely scarier than zombies. So controller choice, and I kind of, I talked a little bit about this with making camp, but giving kids a sense of control or choice was a conscious part of the game design and making camp. And there's 55 activities, do some of them. And there's a choice aspect. And so sometimes teachers will say, do the word section or the number section, but they can choose from that. And there's real value in that. And going back to the more options that kids have at home, if it's a worksheet or do something else, it's really easy to pick something else. But if the option becomes, you have 3 different activities, choose from, do one today. It's partly about giving them choice, but it's also, which will make them more likely to do it. But there's also something to be said for the parent aspect, right? And if there's 3 assignments and the kids have to do one, that doesn't require a lot of parental oversight beyond did you do it, you're giving parents the ability to present it to their child as to which assignment did you do or pick, not are you going to do your assignment, yes or no. And we all know, going back to basic psych classes that we probably had to take, that presenting options versus yes or no is more likely to yield an outcome where one of the options is selected. And maybe you'll only get one of the 3 assignments back, but when a lot of teachers are having trouble tracking down assignments and getting things in, 1 out of 3 is better than 0 out of 1. And if they're engaging things, the kids will actually do them. And I can say this citing 6 years of field research we've done and had peer reviewed and all those things, but I also say it just in my own house, right? My 2nd grader has packet work and she has some stuff on her tablet that the teachers work to make interactive. The tablet stuff she does without prompting, and then she will lay on my office floor for twice as long whining about doing the workbook pages, right? Twice as long as it would take her to do them. So if we can make them more fun, we can get kids excited about doing them, and we can really get them learning from that work. And one thing I want to say before I end, because I know it's easy for someone to say, you can do this and do this and this, and here's these cool things. I try to give a number of examples with an idea being that in any presentation, maybe 1 or 2 of them ends up working in some variation of a takeaway that each person can use. I know when I taught, especially in the beginning, I stressed a fair amount about how it could be done better or better next time. And admittedly, after you've taught something a few times, you get more comfortable, but you're probably still always thinking about how you could be improved. And the thing with distance learning is this is everyone's first time pretty much teaching like this. And you're not going to be able to provide the experience that they would get in the classroom. We talk all the time about expectations around education, and it's not a fair one to be putting on yourself even about this is what it should be. And so one thing I've come away with in all the conversations with the teachers in the last weeks that we've had as we've been bringing on new teachers and working with our existing schools is, it's 100% okay to think, I did not sign up for this. You know, I've had teachers tell me exactly that. And they're working though really, really hard anyway to make it, even though this was not even not part of the plan. This was not even within the realm of consideration as being part of a plan until maybe 2 months ago. And you were given days and weeks to take an in-person based curriculum and turn it into a distance learning solution that meets the needs of a classroom or classrooms full of kids at different levels under circumstances that most learning materials aren't meant to be deployed. And you know, I know someone in the chat said it, but you know, you're building the airplane while flying it. And that is absolutely incredible. So thank you not only for jumping on this webinar Unconference, but for the amazing work that you are doing on behalf of your students. So anyways, yeah, I am Maria at 7 Generation Games. If you have questions, you can, I think we have a couple minutes. Otherwise, we can, my email's there, everything's on the presentation, Maria at 7generationgames.com. This will be on the link, and happy to go from there. So thank you guys so much.
Maria, thank you so much for that. It's always a pleasure to learn more about your materials. When we co-presented at the Fireside Chat hosted by Ed Metz at ESA this winter, I learned so much about your materials, and I've shared your links to teachers in many places around the country when I've had the opportunity to. So do we have any questions for Maria before we transition to a quick break and then go to the next presentation?
I think Anne Marie has been really on top of it in the chat, kind of getting back to people. So I'm fortunate to have her not just as my chat person here, but just as our general co-founder and genius mind behind 7 Generation Games.
Well, you guys make a fabulous team, and learn something every time I hear you speak. So thank you for everything that you did to prepare for today and for sharing all the wisdom that you and your team have with these teachers in a time that's very difficult. So with that, we're going to go to break right now, and then we'll be back at 1 o'clock. All right, take care.